Hello, my name's Kathy, and this is my friend Worry Bear. In all the years I've known Worry Bear, from time to time he suddenly decides he wants to write a story. When I say write a story, he's not very good at writing. Holding pens doesn't work with furry paws, and neither really do keyboards, so he whispers them in my ear, and I write them down. And Worry would really like me to tell you the story he wrote one Easter. It's about a little girl called Evie. And Evie had a problem. Evie had had a very sad life. She had grown up in a family where the people who ought to have loved her and cared for her and looked after her hadn't done any of those things. Instead, they had hurt her, they had locked her up, they had been cruel to her, and they had done things that she couldn't even begin to describe. Evie didn't know about love. She'd been taken away from those people, and after a few weeks of bouncing from place to place, she was told she was going to go and stay with somebody who would hopefully one day become her new mummy. Evie wasn't very sure about whether she fancied that. After all, her last mummy hadn't been great, so what about the new one? And her mummy was a bit unsure, because in what ways was Evie going to struggle to adjust to living in a real family? Evie didn't know how to receive love. She didn't know about hugs and cuddles and all the things that go with being loved. And her mum didn't know how to teach her. For the first week, every time Mum tried to come near to Evie, Evie would scream, or kick, or punch, or bite, or anything, just to keep people away from her. Because all Evie knew was that if people came close to you, it was to hurt you. So she thought she'd get in first and hurt them. So now her mum was even more troubled and even more worried. How was she going to teach Evie about love? And then she had an idea. She took Evie to a toy shop and she bought the biggest, softest, fluffiest, sweetest teddy bear she could find, with the loveliest smile, and she put it straight into Evie's arms for Evie to hug. Evie didn't know what to say. No one had ever given her anything as nice as this bear. Very carefully she held it and hugged it and stroked the furry paws. But she kept waiting. She wasn't meant to have things this nice. Surely somebody would come along and take it away. But nobody did. So the bear went home, and Evie put the bear on her pillow, and that night, as she drifted off to sleep, Evie stroked the bear's furry paws. And in the morning when she woke up, the bear was still there on her bedside. So she picked him up and she hugged him and she took him with her as she went to do the things of her day. And she carried the bear round with her and she hugged him whenever she felt she needed a hug. And the bear stayed with her. She didn't quite know what to do because this wasn't right. This didn't feel right. She kept waiting for the bear to hurt her, or at the very least to be taken away so she'd cry when he was gone. But the bear didn't hurt her. He didn't kick, and he didn't bite, and he didn't spit, and he didn't go away. So Evie didn't know what to do. So in the end, she started hurting him first. She pinched him, and the bear stayed. And she punched him. And then she kicked him round the bedroom. And the bear didn't go away. So she beat him. And she pulled his ear off. And the bear didn't go away. And she kicked him round the bedroom, and she pulled his arms off, and she tore at him, and she pulled out all the stuffing, and she kicked him and kicked him and kicked him and kicked. And she stopped, and she looked at what she'd done. Poor bear, he hadn't hurt her. He hadn't done her any harm, and she'd killed him. She picked up the bits of bear and what she could of the stuffing, and she hid them in the dustbin and hoped her mum wouldn't notice. And that night Evie went to bed very lonely, and she cried. Evie's mum noticed. She noticed that the bear was missing. She noticed the bits of bear and stuffing in the dustbin. So after Evie had gone to sleep, she went quietly into the bedroom and collected the dustbin and pulled out the bits of bear and sat down with needle and thread. And late into the night she stitched. She put the ear back on. She put the paws back on, and she brushed that glossy fur, and she found fresh stuffing, and she refilled him, and then she carefully stitched up Bear's tummy where Evie had torn it open. The next day was Saturday. Evie didn't go to school. She sat in front of the television miserably. She kept waiting for her mum to say something, to shout at her, probably to beat her over what she'd done to the bear. Evie's mum didn't say anything either. She kept waiting for Evie to explain, to say what had happened, to say what had upset her so much. Sunday morning, Evie opened her eyes, and there, on the pillow, was her bear. It looked like her bear, but it couldn't be her bear. She'd killed him, surely. She reached out, and she stroked the paw, and it felt like her bear. She picked him up and looked at him, and there, down his tummy, was a little seam where he'd been sewn back together. It was her bear. So she picked him up, and she hugged him, and hugged him, and hugged him, and then she went running to find her mummy. Mum was sitting in the lounge when she saw Evie come in with the bear. She took a very deep breath because she didn't know what she was going to say. And suddenly a very small girl bundled into her, sobbing, and hugged her so tight, saying, "I'm so sorry, and thank you for loving me, and thank you for not being cross, and thank you for not shouting at me, and thank you for not beating me over what I did to the bear, and thank you for giving me my bear back." And Evie cried, and Mum cried, and the bear cried inside and went on smiling on the outside. Happy Easter to you.